In 2016, the Republican Party held a voting campaign to figure out which person they will send in the race for US president, the so-called US primaries. 4 of the most promising candidates were Marco Rubio, Donald Trump, Jeb Bush, and Ted Cruz. Despite tough opposition, Donald Trump was able to win the Republican primaries and would later go on to beat Hillary Clinton to become the 45th President of the United States of America. However, this result was quite surprising because many people disliked Trump. Of course, he had a loyal support base behind him, but most Republicans despised him for his new style and thought he wasn't fit to run for president. The reason why Trump won was that his opponents could not rally behind one candidate. Instead, they split up among the other candidates who lost against Trump individually. In our simplified example, Rubio, Bush, and Cruz each would get 2 votes, while Trump wins the election with 3 votes. In our video, we want to present a new kind of voting system called Quadratic Voting. In Quadratic Voting, each voter receives, as an example, 10 points. A voter can freely distribute the points among the candidates. However, each vote costs a quadratic number of points. Let's look at an example. A Trump voter would need to pay 1 point to give Trump 1 vote. To give Trump a second vote, he would need to pay an additional 3 points, so 4 or 2 squared points in total for 2 votes. Because Trump supporters only like Trump, they will probably want to use their whole budget of points on Trump. So, they would pay another 5 points to give Trump a third vote. In total, they have paid 9 or 3 squared points to give Trump 3 votes. Technically, they would have 1 point left, which they could use to give to another candidate, for example, Rubio. However, Trump supporters only like Trump and don't want to increase the chances of any other candidate not named Trump to win. Additionally, they do not have enough points to give Trump a 4th vote, because this would cost 16 points in total, which exceeds the budget of 10 points they started with. Therefore, the leftover point is unused. For, let's say, a Rubio supporter, this may be different. Of course, he also has 10 points at his disposal, and he likes Rubio very much, so he pays 9 points to give Rubio 3 votes. However, he does not mind Ted Cruz and uses the leftover point to give Cruz 1 vote. For another voter, this may be different. He may like Rubio and Cruz equally much and therefore pays Rubio 4 points for 2 votes and Cruz 4 points for 2 votes. With one of his 2 leftover points, he decides to pay 1 point to give Bush 1 vote and decrease Trump's chance of winning.
We now use the 2016 Republican primaries to show how quadratic voting could have led to a different outcome. A Trump supporter continues to use maximum points as possible to cast votes in favor of Trump. Each of them uses 9 points and casts 3 votes in favor of Trump, giving him a total of 9 votes. Let's also say that each of the other candidates, Rubio, Bush, and Cruz, has one such staunch supporter. They too use 9 points each to cast 3 votes in favor of their favorite candidate. With their 1 remaining point each, they don't mind cross-voting. Now there are 3 non-Trump supporters left. These voters are a little more on the fence. They may be indifferent between 2 candidates. Let's say one of them is indifferent between Cruz and Rubio and hence uses equal number of points to cast 2 votes in favor of each. With their 2 remaining points, one of them is given to Bush. A second candidate is indifferent between Bush and Cruz in a similar manner, and with their 2 remaining points, one of them is used to cast a vote in favor of Rubio. The final one is once again indifferent between Rubio and Cruz, and one of the two remaining points is used to cast a vote in favor of Bush. Adding up the totals, Cruz wins this election. It's important to note that this is just one way in which quadratic voting could have led to a different outcome. And the truth is, as the number of candidates and voters increases, the number of possibilities in which Trump loses increases as well. How efficient is quadratic voting? As opposed to the one person, one vote scenario where the most favored candidate wins the election, here the most intensely favored choice is the victor. Quadratic voting allows voters to express the magnitude of their preferences. As a safeguard, the increasing marginal cost of additional votes ensures that the magnitude of preferences are taken into account but not overstated. Robustness. Quadratic voting is still open to collusion. However, it is less prone to the underdog effect, one of the possible explanations for Trump's victory in 2016.
Now, with our understanding of quadratic voting, let us discuss some of the pros and cons of quadratic voting. Starting with the advantages, the first advantage is that quadratic voting not only allows voters to choose their most preferred choice, but also to express the magnitude of their preference. This would help to avoid the tyranny of majority, in which the majority simply pursue its own objectives at the expense of the minority. Secondly, the increasing marginal cost of additional votes also prevents voters to overstate the intensity of their feelings or preference. In addition, this mechanism also serves as a nudge for voters to cast some relatively cheap votes for their second or third choice options. In other words, every voter will optimize their own preference based on the given budget of vote credits and thereby achieving the market outcome where the highest preferred outcome is chosen. However, quadratic voting also brings about a set of disadvantages. Most obvious of all is that quadratic voting does sound strange and even appear doubting or confusing for some. Therefore, it is not surprising that there may be high inertia to accept quadratic voting, especially if the population is relatively more senior or not well educated. Lastly, the implementation and execution process may require a significant amount of administrative costs to verify the identity of every individual, to track and tally the votes, while maintaining the secrecy and integrity of such a voting system. Finally, with these trade-offs in mind, let us conclude by discussing what kind of environment would be most suitable for quadratic voting. We think that quadratic voting would be most suitable in a large and regular setting where there is a need to protect the interests of the minorities, and regular voting that allows voters to learn and refine the voting system along the way. These settings could be a world assembly like the United Nations, political institutions like the European Parliament, or corporations and crowdfunding platforms. In fact, there are already real examples where quadratic voting are being used. In 2018, the Colorado House of Representatives used quadratic voting to decide on their legislative priorities in selecting among hundreds of possible bills. Likewise, a popular developer incentive platform, Hackerling, has also leveraged on quadratic voting to help distribute funds to fund public goods and open source projects. So in conclusion, we think that for the right setting and aided with modern technology, quadratic voting holds a great promise to improve and optimize social choice and our decision making. We have come to the end of our video and would like to thank you for your attention. We hope that you have enjoyed and benefited from this video. In the description, we have linked the original article from The Economist, as well as a link for you to try out quadratic voting yourself. We look forward to your comments. Thank you.